What's up guys, JonJonTheWise here, and I got another Cyberpunk video for you guys. This time we're going to be talking about healing, going to the clinic, going to the doctor, patching yourself up. That aspect of Cyberpunk is what I think makes it a very unique RPG, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the history of what my experience has been with it, and then I want to give you guys ideas on how I run it in my game, how it's supposed to be run according to the book, and possibly how you can run it in your game. But before we get into that, make sure you guys join the Discord community. The link will be in the description below. It is a Discord community for Cyberpunk Red in 2020, just waiting for you to join and be a part of. Also follow me on social media at JonJonTheWise on all social media, including TikTok. Please excuse the Warhammer content. And also, make sure you guys listen to Tabletop Cyberpunk, my podcast about cyberpunk. That's right. I have more cyberpunk. Tabletop Cyberpunk is the podcast. I have some great guests on all the time, and I have more set for the future, as well as the Night City Council that I do with James Hutt from Artel Solarian Games. That can be found on the podcast as well. Last but not least, if you guys want to support this channel, the best way you can do it is going to patreon.com/JonJonTheWise, and that is the best way that you can support me. Otherwise, I really appreciate all the support, the likes, the thumbs up, and everything, people reaching out to me and all that stuff as well. I really, really appreciate it. All right, let's get straight into the video. So unlike other RPGs where a healing potion or a healing spell or something of that nature can bring you back to the strength that you had before a combat encounter went crazy, unlike those RPGs, Cyberpunk is a lot different. Cyberpunk really focuses on the grittiness and the realness of being injured, being shot, how serious it is, and how long it takes to recover from something like that. And what that adds as far as an element to the game is, instead of getting into combat encounters, you're really thinking about it. You're weighing your odds. Is this worth it? Is this worth getting shot at, being injured, being in a scenario where I could possibly die? Or is there a way where we can solve these problems without any bloodshed? And because of that, there's a lot of human ingenuity. And even though Cyberpunk is a violent game with cyberware and martial arts and all kinds of stuff, combat is not the only way to solve problems. But just like other RPGs, combat is really fun in Cyberpunk, and it feels empty if you don't pull your gun out, pull out your chrome, your katanas, start slicing people and killing some gonks on the streets. So back in the day, in my Cyberpunk 2020 days, it was basically healing didn't exist. And that was one of those things that we always talked about to new players when they were going to join the game and they said, how can we heal? We would tell them there's no short rest. There's only the hospital. You go to the hospital, you get stitches, you get patched up. You don't get back into a violent encounter until you are fully healed. And mechanically, looking at the mechanics of the game, you needed stuff like speed heal, which we'll get into with Cyberpunk Red. In Cyberpunk 2020, it was a different kind of mechanic. It gave you 1 point per day, and I believe you inherently healed one hit point per day. So that's like 2 if you take speed heal. If you take like nano surgery, it's 3. 3 hit points a day. You have to sit in a hospital bed and you have to do nothing for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, depending how badly you were wounded. And some game masters would take this all the way. If you were shot in the arm, then that arm is not working until, a month from now when it's fully healed, depending on how severe the injury was. If your arm was dismembered, forget about it. You're under surgery, you're getting new cyberware, and it's going to take at least a month for you to rehab the thing. So all those things, if GMs really wanted to, they can pour their reality focus onto that and make sure that you're really suffering through your injuries. So what that really meant was other GMs would have to homebrew some type of way to give their players a break. And I know that for all my old school 2020 players that are listening, giving your players a break is kind of the antithesis of what Cyberpunk 2020 is. But sometimes it would just take away from the fun if we all had to go to the hospital for a month. We're in the Arasaka Tower. It would be nice if we could just get a quick pick-me-up. Nothing too crazy, something really quick. So what I personally would do is I would give my players their body stat number in hit points back, which isn't a crazy amount, but if you have 6 to 8 in your body, 6 to 8 hit points is it can take you from being seriously wounded or mortally wounded back to being a little bit more stable. So it was a way to get through it. And in Cyberpunk 2020, that had to be a homebrew thing. That's not something that's within the book. That's some way that we threw a bone to our players. Now, talking about Cyberpunk Red, they took that homebrew idea that I had, which wasn't really much my idea. It wasn't like crazy inspired. The answer was there. And pretty much everybody else was doing the same thing. So when they wrote Cyberpunk Red, they decided you can heal your body stat. If you sit around and you heal and you don't do anything, you're stabilized, you rest for the day, you'll heal your body stat number in hit points. Now, what they added was speed heal. Instead of it doing 1 hit point a day like it did in Cyberpunk 2020, if you find a good med tech, he can give you a speed heal. He can give you your body plus will stat healed in hit points, in addition to whatever kind of resting you did for the other type. So essentially, speed heal, what that did was it gave you that little bit of injection in a combat encounter or after a combat encounter to keep you in the fight, especially if you're in a combat zone. We can't really turn around and go back to Night City and go to a nice cushy hospital. We have a mission to do. We have something that we need to get done. And I'll take the 8 hit points or 12 hit points that I get from a speed heal. That's the good thing about having a med tech with you, because only a med tech can administer a speed heal. So having that person on your team is very, very vital, or at least hiring somebody out that can do it. Now that we know the mechanics of how it works, we can try to decide if we want to add to it, and we can also decide how we're going to work it out in a role play scenario. I will have to say there's also more mechanics to stabilization and healing. It's in the book. It is in page 222 and 223 of the core Red rulebook. But let's talk about the roleplay issue of it, of how we're going to roleplay this to make it more interesting. So what I would recommend a lot of the times is, if whether you have a medtech or you don't have a medtech, after a combat encounter, if anybody's been shot or stabbed or punched or bones have been broken or anything, after the combat encounter, they need to be stabilized. So there are skills within the game: first aid, paramedic, surgery, which is surgery is dedicated to the medtech. These 3 things are ways that you can stabilize somebody from a combat encounter. Obviously, first aid is the easiest one. It's just a regular skill. Paramedic is a ×2 skill, and surgery is exclusive to the medtech. But all 3 of those ways, you can try to figure out a way to stabilize somebody from a combat encounter. So even if you were shot with 1 bullet, 2 bullets, a hail of bullets, you still need to be stabilized and being taken care of. And there are limits to what kind of difficulty value you'll have to roll within the game. And I encourage you to use these as suggestions and fluid numbers. Do whatever you want that works for you. But it's a great yardstick to figure out how high of a number you need to roll on your skill to stabilize somebody, to stop them from bleeding out. So let's say you're in a combat encounter, you have a situation where somebody gets shot, somebody gets hurt, and you have to decide, all right, do we move on? Do we try to do some street medic stuff, in the middle of combat? Or do we turn around, go back and chalk it up as a loss today, come back and fight another day? Usually players do not want to give up. They don't want to turn around, and they would usually rather die than admit that they need to go back to a hospital and heal. So they always take the risky option, which ends up usually working because they're a bunch of badasses. So the risky option is to do some field repairs. And I encourage you guys to think about how this works. Did the person need stitches? Did the person just need bandages? Did the wound go straight in and out? What are all these things look like? Take notes of them, have your players take notes of them during the combat encounter, and just think about it logically. Like I said in the past in other videos, even with James Hutt during our Night City Council, Cyberpunk Red is a system for game masters to use GM fiat as much as they can. It's your table, your rules, do whatever you think works for you. We've all been doing it in the Cyberpunk 2020 days, and it's no different during Cyberpunk Red. So after a combat encounter, you have stabilized everybody. Maybe you gave them a few speed heals, and you're off to the races. Now, I think that has to be the limit, and that is the limit to how much more you can heal in Cyberpunk Red, because speed heals can only be used once a day, and the other way to heal is sitting at home and doing nothing, or sitting in a hospital bed and doing nothing, and you'll earn your body stat and hit points back. So if you're going to forego the hospital bed and resting, all you're going to get is the speed heal, which is your body plus your will stat, administered by a med tech. That's very important to remember. Your body plus your will stat is all you're going to get for that entire day. Now, I don't know how you guys run your campaigns or how you guys like to do things, but usually my campaign arcs take place within 1 to 3 days, 5 days the most. And the reason I do that is because I want my players to feel like they are working on a mission right now. When they're going through something, they're really going through it, through the recon phase, the execution. When they're at an Arasaka building, that could be 5 or 6 sessions, and it's all taking place within a few hours, if you think about in-game time. So that means if they did a speed heal 5 sessions ago, they're not going to be able to do another speed heal while they're in the middle of this Arasaka tower. So you have to decide to yourself, what kind of position do you want to put your players in? Always give them the choice to run back to Night City and try to take care of themselves. And don't be afraid to throw a little ambush every now and then on their way back, because no one is safe. Even in D&D, when you do a long rest or a short rest in camp, there's a chance of a wandering monster. That idea lets the players know that no matter what, you're not safe, even when you are trying to be safe. Now, other than stabilization in combat, there's other ways where you guys can patch yourselves up. Let's say you don't have a med tech in the group. Let's say you haven't hired any kind of med tech or trauma team, and they haven't come up to help your players. Well, then you got to go find a place. And whether you find a place within the city that has a license and AC and doctors that went to school, or you went to a corner bodega where in the back there's a guy, he's Cuban, don't ask him where he got his license, but he's been taking care of this community for 30 years, so obviously he knows a little bit about patching up a wound. Whatever you do, make sure that you give your players the opportunity to role play that situation. Bargain with the doctor. Make sure you add some kind of quirks, like, does the doctor have a fumbling hand? Is there something going on within the hospital or the clinic, an overarching problem that the players can be a part of, or just have to bear witness to as things are unfolding before their very eyes? These are all things that you can add to their healing situation, where they're going to add roleplay elements and not just leave it to a bunch of dice rolls. It's always something to do. Even when you're healing, net running, combat, or having a conversation in a nightclub, all these things are different opportunities for you to roleplay. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support and love. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take care. Love you. Love all my patrons. Goodbye.